So in the previous sessions, we've talked about value, we've talked about customer, and last month we talked about waste. And in this one, we're going to talk about process or processes. So what is a process? The sequence of actions and the resources required to transform input to output that is meeting the customer needs. So if the fit, form, or function doesn't change, or something that the customer isn't willing to pay for, then we call it waste. And so I'm kind of getting to that when we're talking about changing input to output, meeting the customer needs. So the idea is that you're actually adding value, you're changing the fit, form, or function of it. So frequently, a way to look at things, I don't know if anyone has heard of this before, but it's called SIPOC. So it's supplier, input, process, output, customer. So when you're looking at your processes, frankly, we want to understand what the input is to the process step, and then your process step, since we're talking about changing something, adding value, you would want to describe it in an action, verb type of thing. And then identifying the output and who the customer of that process step is. So process elements. So there's actually 5 of them. 4 of them have M's: man, machine, materials, method, and then environment. So man, you could think about people. So if you're going to make this action step, this process step, what are the people attributes about it that you need? What are the knowledge, skills, abilities, behaviors, norms, assumptions? So a lot of this comes into the culture piece that you're after. A lot of what we think there. And then machine, you could think of that as like tools or equipment. So that Taylor, that's like the capital equipment that you were talking about. Any of the equipment or tools that you would need to make that change. So there may be software, if that's actually where what is making the transformation there. Materials. For office or service businesses, usually materials is information or data, but it could be raw materials or even consumables. If you're thinking about a manufacturing process of you have raw materials that you're using to convert, but you also may use rags and chemicals and for cleaning or painting or those type of things. There's a lot of consumables that you need. Most people, when they think about process, think about the 4th one there, the method. So what's kind of the step-by-step tasks that you need to do? If you think about a procedure kind of thing. And then the environment. So that can be everything from the physical layout, temperature, humidity. Again, those things are more manufacturing oriented, but can also have to do with the org structure of how you're operating in your business as well. So kind of dumped a whole lot of stuff on you there. I'm not necessarily expecting you to write it all down and remember it, but kind of the big thing, the takeaway that I would like you to have is that for each process step, there's process elements associated with it in understanding that process step. most of you probably have a pretty good handle on the methods piece, but it's especially in newer startup businesses or things that maybe somebody's been doing it for a long time and then there's someone new that comes in, there's usually a gap here on what were all of the knowledge, skills, and abilities that are really required in order to successfully make that process transformation step. Okay, so process maturity. I describe them as levels, level 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. As you become more mature, you head towards level 5. So everybody kind of starts out of, you think about a new business, no process is documented, you're just kind of making it up as you go, right? Level 2, you'd move to process documentation, but we see a lot of this in more established companies that have written down how to do things, but is that actually the way that they're done? So a lot of big companies have policies and procedures and everybody ignores them and does what they think anyway. So so when processes are documented, you frequently hear that referred to as a standard. And then level 3 is standard work. And so if you've been around Lean at all, you've probably heard the term standard work. And so the definition of that are your processes are documented and you're following. Yeah, you're following them. So level 4 is where you begin to improve the processes. And so that's where a lot of the Lean tools actually come in, is just moving from level 3 to level 4. And then level 5 is what's called standard operations. And it's kind of taking all of these where you have processes that are documented and followed and balanced and leveled to takt time. So I haven't ever defined takt time before to some of you, so does anybody know what that is? So takt time means the customer demand. So if I'll just use manufacturing to start with because it's easiest to think about physical products. But if you have customer orders for 100 a week, that's what we're talking about. So your processes need to be able to deliver 100 a week. So when you're back in here, you have a documented process and you may be following it, but it says nothing about its ability to actually meet the customer demands. You may have this really great process, but it doesn't have the ability to actually meet customer demand. So a lot of growing businesses could be here and their customer demand changes. And so you need to do something about the process. Improve it, change it in order to meet the customer demand. So where do you think you guys are on the continuum with your processes? All right, so we've talked about process, we've talked about process elements, we've talked about process maturity, and we're going to talk about process tiers. And so I'll just go right into it. So you've probably heard people talk about, tier 0, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 type of thing. So my definition of tier 0 is kind of the top level value stream, or you could say it's the product or service that you have for sale. So if you have multiple different products, probably would be in different value streams, and we say that's at the tier 0 level, that I have X product, Y product, Z product. Dropping down a level, we'd usually map that process in like 10 to 12 tasks. I know that says 3 to 10 on there, but I usually try to keep it under a dozen at this level. And then if you need to blow that out farther, you can go down, you could take one of those process steps and blow it out farther. And then the process elements that we were talking about, you could do the 4 M's in the environment, man, machine, method, materials. Didn't do that in the right order. But, so for each one of these process steps, you could do that. And if you needed more detail, you could do a real blow-by-blow, step-by-step type of thing, where kind of start introducing decision blocks and that kind of thing as well. Generally, you would kind of map the tier 1 and then as needed drop down into the tier 2.